Hello, I'm Ted Seides, and this is Investment Management Operations. This show explores the inner workings of the most sophisticated institutions in the industry. Through conversations with executives across operations, compliance, legal, and finance, you'll hear how key operating partners run their businesses in an ever-changing and complex investment landscape. You can join our mailing list and access Capital Allocators content at capitalallocators.com.
I'm Scott McDonald, and I'm your host. My guest on today's show is Jim Creta. Jim is the Chief Technology Officer for Brandeis University. Jim shares his career path at Brandeis, which started at the help desk 21 years ago, to the CTO seat. He shares how he partners with the investment committee and the CIO to assess risk with new technology and information security for its investment office. We also discuss common challenges and how to partner with technology teams for better outcomes when selecting technology. In addition to being a CTO, Jim is also an adjunct professor in organizational leadership at Brandeis. I found this really interesting because there is no playbook for leadership, but Jim shares his lessons learned about leading teams today, the impact of going hybrid, and creating teams built for flexibility. Please enjoy my conversation with Jim Creta. Jim, it's great to see you, and I'd love to talk all about technology, your role at Brandeis University, and kick it off. Tell us a little bit about your career path.
I started working at Brandeis in 2002. Prior to that, worked various other positions for financial institutions doing tech work, but began as a help desk person in 2002 at the International Business School. It was a brand new graduate school, and I actually had the pleasure of watching basically a startup graduate school grow significantly over that period of time that I was at the graduate school, which was from 2002 to the end of 2015. So when I started, I was the only tech person there. And then I had a student worker. Then I had a second student worker. Then I had a full-time employee and so on. And years later, I had a fully developed department. And so I was actually able to grow a department from the ground up, which was really great learning experience. I was in my late 20s going into my 30s, and it was like a dream because we were really thriving as a school. Worked my way through almost every little position that you can in the IT world. We did a bit of everything. We did media services. We worked on databases. We worked with the alumni group. And by the time I was finished working at the business school, I was the executive director for technology and facilities, capital projects, which was a whole other piece. We were comprised of one building at the time, and the school, I think my first year there, graduated like 30 students. The next year it was 60 students, and it just grew, and they simply were busting at the seams. They needed to put another building up. In the beginning, the project manager stepped away from the project. Brandeis didn't actually have someone to replace that person. I acted as the liaison PM because I had some background in that, and through that, I became a project manager working in facilities. I remember going to the Boston Design Center and looking at swatches and picking out furniture. And I remember coming home at night, my wife saying, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm looking at swatches, leave me alone." As you walk through the building there, I chose the carpet, I chose the furniture. That was a big part of what I was doing. It just slowly morphed into it. So with that, when you put a new building up connected to an old building, the old building needs to be refurbished and refinished and renovated. And so all of a sudden I'm renovating for years. And so all of a sudden now I'm doing capital projects and I'm doing renovation work, and there's a whole other world. And I think that's critical too for anyone in any position really, is to always go in with your eyes wide open. You should actually dip your toes in something. It's good to feel uncomfortable.
Are you still doing facilities?
No. Jeez, no.
Do you still design at your home? Do you do interior design?
Yes, I do. My wife actually values my opinion now, which is, she said, little did I know you actually have some small eye for it. I'm not great. There's certain things that I'm not good with, but there's certain things I actually am pretty good with.
And so how did you end up getting the CTO role?
That was from 2002 to 2015. That's a long time to be with any one organization. And there were certainly points in time where I actually had that itch to learn more and see what was out there. And there were really critical points in my career that I was looking to try different challenges and was looking outward. And each time that's happened, Brandeis came through with, hey, we have another challenge for you. And I'm big on that. I like challenges. I get bored very easily in the sense that once I've climbed the mountain, what's the next one to climb? And so they've been really great about that. Fast forward 2015, again, quite literally had my foot out the door. I was looking at other positions. The current CTO at that time left for another position. I got a phone call one day from the provost's office asking me if I'd come by after working hours, and I did. And my name had been thrown up for being the interim. And I think the allure of me doing it from their perspective was that I was a decentralized person who saw it as a customer, saw how technology worked as a customer, and there was a lot to be fixed there. So once again, it was one of those things where I quite honestly had a job offer somewhere else ready to go, and the timing of it was impeccable, and they offered this great challenge. And Brandeis is a great school. It's a Research One institution, ranked very highly, and so why wouldn't I take on that challenge?
And so before we dig into your what you do at CTO, but you're also an adjunct professor as well.
During my time, one of the great perks of being in higher education is that higher ed is valued. They want you to get education. They want you to go on further and to learn more. And so during that time, I received my master's degree from Brandeis in IT management, and then my doctorate from Northeastern University in organizational leadership and communication specialization. In 2008, I was graduating from the program. My wife and I were in the middle of moving from one house to the other. The graduation was coming up, and I really did not want to attend the graduation. I work at Brandeis, and I was thinking they can just mail me the diploma. I'm totally cool with it. And my wife was saying, no, you have to go to this thing. It's not about you. It's about us seeing you walk, and it's important. So I'm like, okay. In the meantime, I get contacted by the graduate school telling me that I was voted to be the student speaker. I didn't put my name in for that. So I went home and I whined about it to my wife and said, look, I don't want to do this. It's too much. I got too much going on. We're moving. It's crazy. And so she informed me that I will be talking at the graduation. And so I went to the graduation. I walked, I talked, did all those pieces there. When I finished, we were saying hello to different people that afternoon at the reception. A former professor of mine approached me and said, hey, I remember you from class. I actually voted for you to speak today. And it's funny that I saw you up there and I thought of something for you. I saw you up there and it made me think we need someone to teach this class. It was an organizational leadership class, and I think you'd be great for it. And so to me, the moral of the story is that had I not walked, had I not talked, had I not put myself out there, this guy would never have saw me up there, and I never would have got the offer to teach because I had never considered teaching. It was never really in the cards for me. I just never thought of doing it. The next thing I know, I'm in front of 30 plus students in a classroom at Brandeis, and I'm teaching. And so it created a whole different career path. Now, many years later, I still teach at Brandeis. During that time, I was the program chair for one of their master's programs. And so I'm fully invested in the program and fully invested in teaching. And I love it. It's a great outlet.
And what are you teaching more specifically?
I'm teaching organizational leadership. I'm teaching strategy courses, as well as project management. Most recently teaching project management to biotechnology students, which is really interesting when you think about it, given the world that we're in now.
And then maybe give us a walkthrough of what is the role as CTO at Brandeis?
So I have 6 direct reports. We run networks and systems, security is in my purview. We have a help desk, of course, media technology services, data and systems integrations. I have roughly 90 full-time employees. I have a ton of contractors. We definitely deploy a lot of student workers to help out in areas, particularly in the help desk and media services as well. It's a really big job. When I came on to being the CTO, there were a lot of challenges within the group. And I did the whole kind of 100 days where I was just kicking the tires. And it was a group that was beaten down quite a bit, and they really had no direction. And I always remember my final exam, if you will, was standing in front of the board after my 100 days and presenting to them what I saw and also reporting out where I think the priorities are. And after I finished, one of the trustees approached me and said to me, "You really scared the crap out of us," which was what I was really going for. I wasn't looking to scare them per se, but I was looking for them to actually take it seriously and to get a board of trustees to actually acknowledge that technology is extremely important. I can fast forward the story for you and say that we fixed what we needed to fix, which was infrastructure. Some of our systems were antiquated, and we really have move forward in a really positive manner.
Is there anything else that you guys are doing differently at Brandeis compared to other institutions?
One of the things I can actually say that we've done really well, and we started doing it years ago, was hiring a change manager and taking on the idea that change management was critical to our institution. And people don't take well to change. And we were changing everything. We were changing ERP systems. So basically how you get paid, how students enroll for classes, from soup to nuts, we're changing all those systems. Security-wise, we're changing over to two-factor authentication. We're doing PII shredding. We're putting stronger spam filters on. So people are going to have to do for themselves on certain things and teaching people how to fish. So in order for us to be successful at that, you need to deploy proper change management. And that is not just communication, it is going out into the community and having discussions and having liaisons of people in their groups and having them go back to their groups. We were deploying this stuff back in 2018. And I know for a fact that we were very much ahead of the curve when it came to other higher ed institutions, because I took a lot of phone calls and had a lot of conversations with people about what we were doing. So I'm pretty proud of that. We actually were able to deploy that and really get ahead of it.
And what about your interaction between the investment office of Brandeis University and the board of trustees?
The chief investment officer and I both report to the same person. So I'm in the room regularly with the chief investment officer, which is great. We've actually had to look at that office because it doesn't sit on campus. It is off campus. It's in the city. And we've had to be extra secure with them because of the nature of their jobs. We run fiber directly to that building, so we have better control over data. We do point-to-point encryption, which is standard, but nonetheless, we do it. We also have a dedicated full-time employee in my security group that works with on a regular basis. We deploy people to the city to work with them on their machines because we image machines and their images are different than other images. And we try to make sure that they're secure. We have a program on there. If someone's doing something that's out of the ordinary on the machine, then the machine actually automatically locks. And so just to be cautious about it, it sounds a little harsher than it is, but it's just to make sure that no one's doing anything out of the ordinary. And then once in a while, we actually have had the investment office contact us about potential investments they want to make in a certain technology or a certain company. Or so we actually have acted as advisors on different occasions. And then whenever they want to purchase a third-party system or if there's something that they need, we're very much part of that as far as the contracts go. We do the reviews for it, and sometimes we do the implementation depending on how intricate it is. We do have a finger in it, there's no question.
Yeah. What's a good example of something like that? And what value add you play from that perspective?
So the big thing now is looking at the accountability of the third party that you're looking to hire. That's where you see a lot of the hacks happening. There have been a number of third parties that most institutions use that actually have had breaches. And the problem is, how do you control that? So if we were to have a breach on our data, then we have certain rules and there are certain laws that you have to alert people that have been breached, send them a letter. Sometimes you have to pay a fee for that. If you don't actually vet that with the third parties, you'd be surprised at how many don't actually have the proper language that really will cover us. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking to see that they actually have the right language in there. And then we're also looking to see if they have a secure environment. What's the track record? What type of systems are they using? What is their security posture as an organization? And so myself and our CISO, who's actively involved with a lot of that.
And what about data? So if you're using third-party service, but your data is sitting on somebody else's environment, is there anything that you would recommend to others? Let's say the firm goes under. How do you get all that data history back if it's sitting within their environment?
That's where the contract is really important. That's where you want to make sure that you are covering yourselves, that there's something in writing that you actually can get your data back and you're entitled to it with the contract, because that's how you get yourself into trouble. Because you're right, data does flow in and out. How do you protect that? There's no perfect answer to that question. In a lot of ways, you hold your nose and you dive into the deep end of the pool, right? You do the best you can with trying to protect yourself in contract language. And then also just ensure that you don't always know this, but make sure you're getting into a relationship with an organization or a company that actually is legitimate or has established and actually has good practices. That's why it's important to vet what they do. Much like how an investment person wouldn't just invest in something without fully vetting it. I am quite sure that there are checklists that you would go through and a lot of discussions. We do the same thing on our end.
Are there any areas that you see more often than not in terms of shortcomings or red flags that you could share?
Well, sometimes certain systems don't talk to our systems a certain way. There's integrations that are required. People think it's plug and play. So a salesperson for a piece of software is going to tell you, oh, we'll do all the work and it's plug and play. It's easy. It's never that easy. It's never that simple. Sometimes we already have something that does what people want to purchase. There's redundancy on campus. And there's also a problem with third parties. It's not a horrible word, but it can be. When you have like third parties can turn into shadow systems, then you're talking about data integrity issues, and then the ball gets rolling. Then what's the data? What's the true data? And that can be problematic. And particularly with an investment office where they're out on an island a little bit, I have enough problems on campus, never mind. You got to be cautious of that because it can turn into something that you don't know. Even people keeping shadow systems on spreadsheets or creating their own access databases, that exists. That's a real thing. And that's a real problem, particularly if you're reporting to the board off of data that's not actually true data.
And maybe go back to your point on the whole sales pitch and reconciling what you're being sold versus what's actually happening. I think my experiences over time, this has gotten a lot better. But basically, how do you think about tying together the statement of work with the pitch? Or maybe the pitch doesn't matter and it's all about the statement of work.
The pitch is important for the actual stakeholder, but the pitch isn't so much important to us as the statement of work. But we have a whole process that we put into place. So a project comes down the pipeline, there's a PM that gets involved. Our procurement department gets involved. Our legal department gets involved. There's a strong review. Another piece in there is accessibility. That's a huge pitfall. That happens constantly where people will present something to us and it's not accessible.
What do you mean by accessible?
There has to be certain code. So if someone has a disability, they have to be able to use the product. That's very much part of the law. There have been schools, there have universities, you just Google it, that have been fined millions of dollars for not making their web pages accessible, for example. Or we use Workday as our ERP system. That's accessible. It has to be. You have to make sure that people that have any kind of disability are able to use the system to do their job on a day-to-day basis. The same thing would probably hold true for any third-party system that an investment office or any office for that matter would be using. So there's an accessibility review that actually goes along when it goes through legal. And we've turned back a lot of different third parties and pushed back at them and said, okay, this is not accessible.
Just given your background in organizational leadership, let's turn to your experience leading teams. You're in the perfect seat to share some really good insights there.
So I started as CIO. I moved buildings, of course. And I remember walking into the building. I had been in the building many times, but walking into the building as the CIO is a whole different thing as a visitor. It was never a pleasing building aesthetically from external and even internal. And I'm not exaggerating this. So I walk in and I'm looking at it, the critical eye. The floors have walk-off mats, like in buildings. So that's what the carpets were in the hallways, and they were duct taped down. The walls were that pinky, what was that medicine that we used to take when we were kids? That pinky.
Pepto-Bismol?
Yes. It was like that pinky color combined with a horrible brown. The ceilings were exposed. When you walked in the kitchen, the refrigerator was always leaking. I'm not making this up. Short of a tumbleweed flying through the building, the doors were all closed. And meanwhile, the building's full of people, but there was no action. They would have the lights off in the hallway. People were just hunkered down when I showed up. And I understand why, is that they were beaten up a little bit. All they did was just put out fires. They worked hard, but they had no goals. There was nothing to aspire to. And there was no reason for them to put themselves out there because they were going to get slapped down. At least they felt that way. A beaten group. And even when I got into my office the first time, I had a colleague show up for a meeting. I had a meeting table with 4 different chairs in it. And there was just like huge stains all over the floor. The place was just run down. This is no exaggeration. And she was a good friend of mine. And she looked at me and she said, "My dear, you need to clean this up. It looks like someone's been murdered in here." I took that to heart and knew what I needed to do. We had all these problems with infrastructure. We had all these technical issues. But how am I going to lead a team to fix all these things when I can't even get them to come out of their offices? Like when they don't feel good about themselves, they don't feel good. They don't feel cohesive as a department. They were a team in name only. And so the first thing I did the first couple of months was actually renovate the inside of the building because God knows I have my own home and garden channel because I had previous experience doing that. So we brought people in, they redid the building in the sense that just some paint on the walls and some carpets and some ceiling tiles, which was nice to have. a new refrigerator. We made a common space for people to sit and talk. And it was just to try to get people to feel good about where they work. There's nothing more depressing if you're walking into a place that is what I described. How are you going to take pride in that? How are you going to feel good about that? So to me, it was the idea of fixing internal stuff before I could actually go out. How am I going to go tell the university that we're going to lead change and we're going to do all these great things for you when my team is just not a team yet? And the important part for me is to people say this all the time, but you surround yourself with good people. That is rule numero uno. You're only as good as the people around you, and you need to have folks that are going to do those pieces for you, because I can't go out and do all that. The other part too, one more thing about this, is that they're good people. They're not only just good at what they do, but at the core, they're good people. We've all done that. You work with people that are extremely talented in what they do, but who wants to be their teammate? And how do you motivate people to want to work with them? So it's important for me to have people that are actually good people.
And how do you do that? Like, how do you identify somebody in a short window of time to make sure that you don't end up getting somebody just on their first date giving their best behavior?
Yeah, we go through an interview process. I typically will meet with just about anyone that we hire. We've all swung and missed. You hit some and sometimes you don't. I like to think that our batting average is pretty good, but we usually do vet the process. So we have a culture in the group now, and it's gotten easier with everyone else because everyone understands what we're looking for. And there is almost like a self-selection within the group now. We've gotten to that point where if someone is misbehaving, the group will actually identify it. And there are people that will actually step forward and say, okay, hey, you can't do that. We don't do it this way here, and do it in a productive and helpful manner.
Just think about teamwork and leadership. What's your approach to delegation in order to make yourself more effective?
For me, I don't micromanage. I trust my people implicitly. I push them to make decisions, and I empower them to make decisions. I've had a lot of the same direct reports for a while now, and I feel comfortable with the direction they're going to go in. If my CISO thinks that we should do something, then we'll talk about it, and I'll give them my input. I get to unplug myself from the technical part in many ways. I ask questions, I certainly do, technical questions, but I'm more of, okay, how does the community receive this? All right, so you need to get this one involved in the change management office. This sounds like a project to me too. Should go to governance. Do I need to provide air cover? Do I need to go to my boss and give him a heads up that this is happening? Should I take a meeting with the provost? So to me, it's getting ahead of all of it. I use this analogy all the time, but I feel like I'm the snowplow that's out there at 2 a.m. clearing the road so you can get to work in the morning. That's where I always wanted to be. I don't want to be in the weeds, and I never want to micromanage. If I'm micromanaging, then something's not happening right in the organization, and I'm doing something incorrect.
And just based on your experience and background, nobody admits that they're a micromanager. Is there anything that you can do to make sure that you actually don't adopt those habits?
Sometimes micromanaging is necessary in the sense that someone's maybe new, or maybe you have to hold the hand to step through something that's new for somebody, or they don't have an experience. Or if someone comes to me and says, look, I'm having a hard time with this. Can you help me out? I am happy to sit and brainstorm. I have no issue with that. To me, that's not micromanaging, but there has to be a point where there has to be a liftoff. They're going to have to fly on their own. So I'll tend to, after a while, okay, here's the next step for you. Take the next step. And sometimes I'll ask someone else in my group to attend something that this person's going to make sure that they're okay. I think you can identify yourself doing it because you know you're doing it. We all know if we're micromanaging. So I think if you catch yourself doing it, I think there are ways to actually move it forward, but then try to get your hands off. It's like having kids. At some point, they got to go to school. You got to let them do their thing. And I think that's, for me, that's what I tend to do. I'll help out to a certain degree, but then you got to go on your own.
Yeah, it's a little bit about, I think Ben Horowitz talked about the wartime, peacetime, and their time when you have to actually have a tighter grip on things.
Yeah, when the building's on fire, then there's one voice, and that's when I'm going to get micromanaging. There are definitely times for it. I think it's called box leadership. You tend to be in that box that you need to be in at that particular time, but you can change different types of leadership that you do whenever it's required. So if it requires you to model a certain behavior, then you model the behavior. If it's more hands off, then you take hands off.
We've been through this massive shift with a hybrid approach, and just love your thoughts on how to lead teams today in this fast forward moment.
Yeah, it's a lot different, isn't it? For our group, I never fully subscribed to the fact that just because people think they can be remote and do their job well, that's the guiding post. Or if you bring everyone back too soon, they're going to quit. That didn't happen. At least didn't happen for us. when people were starting to come back and we're bringing students back and they're on campus and they're paying a significant amount of money in tuition fees, and they're paying for an in-person experience, not an online experience. That's the business model of the place that we work. You have to acquiesce to that. As I said earlier, we're a customer service department. How can I possibly tell a student that's paying X amount of dollars, oh yeah, you know what, you're going to need to get on a Zoom call with somebody, or you'll have to schedule a time for them to come and fix your computer because they're not on campus on Fridays. So I brought everyone back for 4 days initially, which was met with some jeers, if I'm being honest. But I had to match what the organization was offering. How do I run my group that way? And to me, I needed to see it operate. Giving people 1 day remote, I needed to see it operate correctly before I can make a proper assessment. And have you ever tried to take an office away from somebody? If I were to give in and be like, okay, you only need to come in 2 days. You can be remote 3. We'll go to a 3-2. How am I going to reel them back in? How am I honestly looking at how things are operating, and how do I assess that properly in all good conscience as a leader? I remember walking around initially. I would walk into people's offices, knock on the door, how you feeling? How you doing? I had some people lay into me, tell me that I didn't trust them, and they would tell me it was great for me when I worked from home. I was more productive, and I would say, okay, great. Thank you for that. You check that box, but you got to understand those other boxes. Does it work for your manager? Does it work for the organization? Does it work for Brandeis? Does it work for the students? Does it work for the faculty? I was trying to explain to them that I need to check all those other boxes too. So fast forward, we did the 4 days in for a while, and then I saw that I could actually give them a little bit more freedom as far as making it 3 days. We tried it over a summer to see if it would work out well, and it did. And then we extended it to a fall semester. But on a trial basis, I was always very cautious about, we're going to see how this works, but it could get dialed back. So just be aware. And at the end of the day, there were a handful of people that left that wanted to be fully remote, but not a whole heck of a lot. It wasn't what people thought it was going to be or what people threatened that it was going to be. So it was a non-factor.
Creating your own custom version of what is flexibility, it almost models reality, because most people have obligations at home, and to have the opportunity to be there to take care of yourself, whether it be healthcare, dentist, whatever, but trying to figure out your own custom version of flexibility in order to get that maximum output. It's a balance. How can we best collaborate with technology team members?
Technology team members, the role has changed significantly. You certainly do have people that they want to be alone. They're basically hid under the building and they don't like the light. They come out of the basement and they feel very Dracula-like. There's certainly people like that, the introverts and that whole piece. But you see a lot of technologists that are more business analysts. And I saw this actually coming to fruition during our ERP implementations, where the business units were leaning on my people to tell them what a business process looks like in their particular groups. What would you think we should do? Because I have people that are actually creating business processes and they see how a group operates and they can figure out how things should flow. So that role has shifted quite a bit. And I can see us being more involved in the business side and being more trusted partners in that way. We're approached by many that look for our help in that respect. Can you do this for us? Which is actually not entirely the right question that we want. We'll partner with you to do it, but you need to be able to do it yourself as well. You need to be able to carry it forth. So it's very much people wanting to give it away, but at the same time, we're willing to help, but to a certain extent.
Given your background, any thoughts on progressions, on career growth, any suggestions for people?
We try to ensure that folks have a place to go from one step to the next and try to teach and learn new things. We've done so many different projects where folks have had to go get certifications or had to learn something, and they become more marketable. Their skills become more marketable. And that's the pitch that we always give them, is that you get to learn something new and we want to retain you. We want you to be here. But at the end of the day, if you find that it's not for you or you don't want to be here, you get this additional thing on your resume that's going to make you so much more marketable. And so I think that it's important for people in general to look at ways of making themselves more marketable, which is like a dirty word in IT, by the way. Marketing is not supposed to be attached to IT, but I fully disagree with that. I think you have to market yourself, but as an IT group, we have to market our services to the community. I have to market internally with our group. Why is this a great place to work? Why we value you, to do things to show that. But I think that people need to think about for their own personal careers is to market themselves.
Jim, this has been really insightful, and we'd like to close with 2 questions. And one is, what advice would you give to someone from a technology perspective?
I think it's important to get involved in the areas that you're not involved in, or at least understand them. It's really always interesting to me as a tech person. How much we're valued varies from organization to organization. It depends on how ingrained technology is into what you do. Google, for example, of course, the CIO is like actively involved with everything. But at a university, I don't know, there's like a lack of understanding sometimes of who we are and what we can do for the institution. Is it appropriate for me to question the chief investment officer about investments that he's making? But is it also okay for me to ask a dean about pedagogy for a particular program? No, I would probably get slapped down for both questions. During COVID, I kept saying, you could operate without a building, but you can't operate without technology. That's pretty much was proven. I would get into discussions internally. We're going to fix this building up or we're going to give you money. Which one do you think we should do? I'm like, you should really do the infrastructure, not the building. What if the roof falls in? I'm like, it doesn't matter. If the roof falls in, you can still have a class. But I think it's understanding where people are coming from. I think that emerging leaders need to understand where people are at. You have to have a tremendous amount of patience for it. But then you also have to give them guidance. You have to have a path for them to go. You have to have governance in place, and you have to have strong controls in process and procedure to help guide them and get them to where you need them to go to.
And then the other question we have is, what industry resource book, could be web page, anything like that, anything that you commonly refer to people to obtain this type of industry knowledge?
I'm going to cheat because you asked for one. I'm going to give a few. The tech section in the Wall Street Journal is something that I keep open on my desktop at all times. It gives a wide variety of what's happening in the world. The reason I'm giving a few is because I work in higher ed. So it's important to keep one foot in higher ed and one foot out to see what the rest of the world's doing. EDUCAUSE is another one that I keep an eye open for. And CIO Magazine is certainly another one. And then if I'm being honest, I talk to other CIOs on a pretty regular basis. That's like going to conferences. The conference itself is not normally helpful, but the sitting down and networking and meeting and talking to people about their challenges is where the rubber meets the road. That's where I put my money.
Jim, this is really insightful. Appreciate the time, all the things integrating tech, leadership, and appreciate your insight.
No, thank you very much. It's been great.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard, hop on our website at capitalallocators.com, where you can access past shows, join our mailing list, and sign up for premium content. Have a good one, and see you next time.